A little disclaimer before we begin. This lesson heavily relies upon knowledge of the modes. It's definitely a very necessary thing to have your major and minor scale as well as harmonic minor scale modes mastered before you look into this lesson. The other thing is that this guitar is tuned to D standard, which is D, G, C, F, A, D. So be sure to tune up. So I'm going to be starting off this lesson with the D Aeolian scale, which starts on our 7th fret since we're in D standard. We're going to be going up only 6 notes in the scale at first, and we're going to be going up the octave of those 6 notes immediately after. What we want to do is create a 12-note phrase, a pattern if you will, that will allow us to crisscross across the fretboard real quick like. So let's begin. What's good about that is that it kind of shows you how you can use a mode to immediately create motion. And the tension is the same because the intervals are the same. The only thing about the tension is that audibly, sonically, what we're hearing is octaves, so it's a little bit more dramatic perhaps. That's why octaves are a fantastic thing to utilize across the fretboard. What's the next thing that we're gonna do? We can always complete the scale, which is kind of, it's okay. Or we can start to go up the modes using 6 notes at a time and then using the octaves of those modes to further up. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go from D Aeolian to D, D sharp, E Locrian to F Ionian using just the first 6 notes of each mode, and then we're gonna go through the octaves of those, nice and slow. Now we have a bit of a run developing, and all we're using is 3 modes with 6 notes per mode, and of course they repeat and it starts to sound a little bit more repetitive, but there is that tension because we're using 6 notes, and that's really clever. I really like that kind of tension. We can always start to develop 4-note runs, but now we're getting into a different kind of territory, and here's what I mean by that. Now, do you see how that feeling is different in your hands? It's a lot more Baroque and a lot more classically inspired, which is why. And that's an interesting thing to do. Why do you think all those famous shredders still rely upon those Baroque techniques and those neoclassical methods? Because they're awfully practical in terms of guitar picking and in terms of kind of sonic tastiness, if you will. And when it comes to shred, that's basically what we're after. Now, we're going to go into the D harmonic minor modes and D harmonic minor kind of key and go over a very specific riff I call the alternate picking riff of doom, because the challenge is to play it perfectly. I'm going to play it slowly for you guys, and then I'm going to play it at its actual speed. Do follow along, this one's a lot of fun. I really love to play that one because I always ask myself if I can really play it fully and perfectly. So the idea behind speeding up like that. A lot of people have issues with the speeding up. There is a moment of tension, which I'm sure that you could actually visually see, and then there was a bit of a relax, because it's just this motion at the end of the day. I'm not trying to beat up the strings. I'm not exactly pivoting around my hand like this. It's just an intensive motion that's mostly right here. Mostly right here. There's nothing particularly vastly uncomfortable about it. I'm really aiming to make sure that every note is audible and heard. That's the big thing. When it comes to alternate picking, even when it comes to chord changes, you always want to play the note long enough. You never want to choke it off just because you're rushing to the next one. Another tip I'm going to throw at you is to pick a little harder if you're one of those softer picking general folk, all right? That's something to definitely consider because you get a lot more attack. Here's what I mean by that. I will slowly play some alternate picking Riff of Doom stuff, slowly and with less attack. I mean, personally, there's no juice, there's no soul in that. So here's the alternative. So there's that difference. One sounds awfully wimpy, and it's because it is wimpy. There's no power in the playing. Alternate picking requires that. I don't care what pickups you have on what guitar, alternate picking demands that you pick a little harder to get that consistency and that clarity. You want to have that pickup break up a little bit. It's not just about playing it to a certain level of medium level fidelity. The most impressive guitar players are not always technicians. They're most of the time very confident pickers. And that's what I would like you to take away from this lesson more than anything else. Alternate picking is about confidence, good attack, good tone, picking it proudly, if you will, as well as having some really interesting numerical things to play around with. Finally, let's go over another interesting little exercise. Now, what I just played there was a little ditty, if you will, of double picking. Double picking is when you go down and up on a single note as opposed to just playing it straight, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It adds intensity to the playing, which is really interesting. I really love double picking for this because you can turn any lead line into a bit of a more intense thing. You're just adding more attack, more notes, quite literally. It's an interesting thing to experiment with when you're coming up with your own shreddy little lick lines at the end of the day. I know that a few very famous prog metal bands actually end up using this technique a lot, and you can hear it all over their playing. It's a fascinating thing because it makes melodies a bit more urgent, and I think urgency is where shred and melody start to come together really beautifully. So with that, I hope that you enjoyed that final example. I hope that you learned some valuable insights. Thank you very much, and I will catch you next time. Cheers.